Well, thank you so much for making the time and joining in. My name is Jeff Fuller, pastor at Living Hope Wesleyan Church, hopeforvermont.org, and I believe people's stories matter, and we can learn so much as we take the time to learn from one another. And one with a tremendous story, and an old friend of mine, I think she would say she was a friend, is Terri Lynn, no longer Lynn, Terri Payk. Terri, welcome in.
Hi.
So of course, and where are you located right now?
So my family and I, we live here in New Taipei City, just outside of Taipei, Taiwan.
Yeah, and I had no idea where that was, so I had to look on a map. And for those that are watching on YouTube, Living Hope Wesleyan Church on YouTube, you can find that's where you are. And so is it winter, summer? What's the season like right now for you?
So actually, this weekend marks the change from summer to fall. Yeah, it's Moon Festival right now. So
it's very similar to here, at least in the East Coast of the U.S., isn't it?
right. It's just extremely, extremely hot.
And now, one thing that I found interesting, just because I'm simple minded, is you're exactly 12 hours away, but it is Monday evening or Sunday evening for you right now.
Yeah, it's Monday evening right now.
All right. So, what everybody wants to know, well, not everybody, but from Ontario to Taipei, talk to me a little bit about growing up in Ontario, first of all.
Oh, I had a great childhood in Ontario. So, if we wanted to go get groceries anywhere, it would take like 30 minutes to go anywhere, right? And some of the best years of my childhood were in a small town called Forster's Falls. We lived there from the time I was in grade 3 through grade 8. And basically that town has like 3 streets.
So what's so much fun for me, and I try to be semi-professional with these interviews, but for you, we go way back to, well, middle school or even before that, because of a Christian church camp that my parents were very involved and your parents were. What is your first memory of Burke camp?
Oh, wow. Wow. Probably being a kid in the children's church, right?
Yeah.
There's that little chapel that we had. So we had our own little chapel. And I think it feels like half the time my mom was the children's director. And so that's one memory, being in the tabernacle. Oh yeah, and the little like gift shop, tuck shop thing,
Yeah.
right? Where you could get like tons of candy for like a penny.
Yeah, there's a good memory, good times. Your parents, Larry and Sharon Hart, I believe it was Heart to Heart Ministries, something like that. But then they spent some time here in Vermont with Dr. Ron Miller. But talk to me a little bit. Your dad, and I say this, well, seriously, but kind of as a confession, he has a gift of discernment, so much so that there are times I didn't want to spend time with him because I'm like, he might know something that I don't even know about myself. Talk to me, just share with me, growing up with such godly parents, what was that like? What type of benefit was that for you as you were just growing up as every kid does?
I think it was a pretty special environment to grow up in because, the body of Christ, we have different gifts. And I think the gift of discernment is one that I don't see it as much as maybe some of the other gifts. So I think it was pretty special that God had my dad with that gift. My mom also, she has some matching gifts that really complement his, like the gift of prayer. So God reveals a lot of things to my dad, and then my mom just has a real burden to pray for people. So that works really, really well together. So yes, but I understand what you mean about being a little nervous about him knowing stuff about you.
Hey, Terri, so you grew up in Ontario, but then you did move to Vermont and spend some time, as we mentioned, with Dr. Miller. For you, how difficult was that move?
To Vermont?
Yeah.
That's going back a few years, but I think that move was I think like we live here in an expat community. There's a lot of movement here, a lot of third culture kids. So there's a lot of transition. And so it was hard in terms of transition, especially until I made some friends. I think it's really hard when you're a teenager to move to a new location. But the move to Vermont was actually not as difficult as the move away from Vermont. That was pretty hard to, I was just so used to Vermont rhythms by then, right? So
How long did you attend Bethany Bible College, now Kingswood? Did you go all 4 years, or was it just a year or two?
yeah, I stayed there for a year, and then I transferred to Indiana Wesleyan. Yeah.
And now what I want to speak to, the book behind me, Adjectives and Analogies. Have you always wanted to write? What kind of led you to pursue this endeavor?
Well, I love stories. I love listening to other people's stories. I love telling my own stories. And so, every family, every person, we have these treasure troves of stories that you tell, at Thanksgiving, and they get rehearsed at these family gatherings, right? And I had a number of those stories of mine and of my parents. And also growing up, as you mentioned, in the home that I did, it was just pretty natural for us to talk about God working in everyday life, and I love writing. So writing seems like a way to marry those two things, the love of stories and the childhood. So I've always wanted to write a book. So it was really exciting for that to come to fruition.
And congratulations on that. I will say my mom, who you know very well, she loves the picture behind because my parents couldn't have children of their own. So they adopted 3 Korean kids from 3 different Korean families. So she certainly has an affection for those that look like the picture on the cover of your book. This picture, was this one that you took, or is this picture that you just stole from offline somewhere?
Better than both of those, actually. So I love this little girl. Chris and I went to South Korea in 2003 to 2002 to 2003. We taught there for a year, and now we've been in Taiwan for 12 years. And so, that's a pretty big chunk of our lives, and we've taught a lot of Asian students. And so I was looking for a picture. I wanted a picture of a kaleidoscope, right? And because I feel like the book is about many different characteristics of God, so I felt like a kaleidoscope was a good, image for that. And I saw this picture, and the picture was like the little tag under the picture said you can't use this for anything that's going to be sold. But I saw that it was written in Chinese. So my Chinese is not amazing, but I just kind of a little sweat and tears to put in a little note to that person. And I said, I told him everything, just told him what I'm doing, and I'm a Christian and I want to write this devotional. And is there any way you would consider letting me use your daughter's picture? And, think about the entire Chinese world, right? So I find out that this guy lives like an hour away here in Taiwan. He says, I'm a Christian too. You totally can use the picture. And I was like, this is such a God thing. It was awesome.
And so it's probably included in the book, which frankly, honestly, I've not started yet because I've been so busy golfing and doing other things. However, I did buy copies for my mom and sister, and they already are halfway through it. They love the stories. They love how you come out through the writing. For you, was the process difficult as far as sharing these things that you were learning that maybe you're still processing? Or was that just something you're just going to be raw and honest and share as you're learning or continuing to learn some of these dynamics about God and your faith?
I think my students would be able to answer that just as well as I could. I really like to share a lot of my life with my students, and this is, I don't see my readers as students, but I just think that it's fun to share what God is teaching you and has taught you. And, there'll be more stories in the future. I believe that we will all be able to share about what he's teaching us. Right. So, yeah.
And again, you can find this book on Amazon, Adjectives and Analogies. It's Terri L, which stands for Lynn, Payk, Payk. And I could not believe the pricing of it. I thought it was very inexpensive. That's why I bought copies, not because I'm generous, but because I'm cheap for my mom and my sister. But what was the process like for you, getting into the weeds a little bit about writing the book, but getting it published and then putting it on Amazon? Was that a learning curve? Did you have people helping you with that process?
Okay, that was a huge learning curve for me because it is my first book, and yeah, so the writing actually was pretty, like that was fun. But then the nitty gritty details, I'm not actually a super detailed person. I have to be for my job, but it's not natural. So yeah, so that was a challenge. I did work with a few people. Like I worked with a formatter to help me, turn a Google Doc into a manuscript. And free advice: if you're ever going to write a book, don't do it on Google Docs. Do it on Microsoft Word. And then I also hired a person to help me with the book cover. So those were some of the nitty gritty details toward the end. Yeah.
Now, I see also on your Facebook account that your brother has a copy of the book. I love Scott. He's the best. And then your parents commented as well. What's been the reception that you've received from family? Is this something that they said they always knew was in you? Or were they like, wow, Terri actually wrote a book? What's been that family response?
I think my extended family was more like, oh, wow, you wrote a book. But my mom's been telling me for a long time that, you should write. You love writing. You should write. You have, there's something there that you need to go for it. So I don't think mom and dad were very surprised. Scott's supportive. I don't think he was surprised. Yeah.
And now
I've been very supportive.
And you said this was your first book. So does that imply that you already have another one in the works?
Not in the works, just in the back of my brain. Yeah. So we'll see.
And now you mentioned off air that you're teaching middle and high school students. So what does that look like for you the last couple of years? And how much space have you had to pursue this endeavor of writing a book or working on the second one, but also, fulfilling your responsibilities as being an educator?
Well, we all have pockets of downtime, right? And so sometimes instead of, binging on Netflix, I would just decide I was going to spend an hour or two or four writing, right? So, yeah, just made some choices. Yeah,
With those choices, I was just preaching yesterday on Colossians 2, and it talks about living a disciplined life. And discipline, I don't like because it holds me accountable, and I just want to be vulnerable. And I think you have to have both. But what healthy life rhythms changes did you have to make, sacrifices, so you could fulfill this dream that you had?
I think my family probably made the most sacrifices. Like my kids I have a teenager and a preteen, and so I think sometimes they made the sacrifices of not having mom might be in the room, but she's not exactly present, right? So, but they've both been pretty supportive as well. So, yeah.
Now, being in Taiwan, what's been the biggest adjustment? I know you've been there 12 years, but is there still something you miss from Ontario or from Vermont that you just wish you could have right there on an everyday basis?
Wow. Well, I think, fresh water sources. There aren't as many here. There are some, but we do have some, but Canadian lakes, you just, those are beautiful. Yeah.
The American lakes are a little bit better though, but so Terri, with your book, Adjectives and Analogies, you can find it on Amazon, amazon.com. Just search Adjectives and Analogies, Terri L. Payk, that's Payk. What are a couple of the stories that keep coming back to either motivate you or just to remind you of what a blessing it was to share these stories?
I really like the chapter called Defender. The idea came from the seed of the idea came from a message that Chris preached at the church that invited us here to Taiwan in the beginning in 2009. And we have this picture. We can see a very small picture of it in Job, where Satan comes to God and he's accusing Job to God, right? And I think that a lot of the time we believers have to face that in our own lives. We face these accusations from the enemy. And I just love the idea. So the chapter is about Jesus, and it's actually happening in heaven. There's Jesus, the Son, and God the Father, and Satan comes in and he accuses Christians. And there are real questions in there, like, she just said this, she just did this, how could she call herself a Christian? Oh, look at that church, they're so weak. Are they really saved? Like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And Jesus stands up to this bully, and he just he just pours out scripture from his mouth about who he is and what he's done for us. And I think that can be a really powerful concept, a really encouraging concept for believers, that Christ is our defender, whether we're having an amazing day or whether we're having a not so great day. So that's one of my favorite chapters.
Amen. That's wonderful, actually. And so thanks for sharing that. Certainly an encouragement. Terri, with Chris being with you and Pastor, what does this look like for you? In North America, we hear about all the battle, the polarization of people, of different groups. For you, is it kind of nice being where you are, or do you sense that as well? And how are you processing it, being, used of Jesus, but just working your day-to-day jobs?
I think there is some distance that comes from not being in the West. For example, at our school, there's like, will you get the vaccine? Will you not get the vaccine? But our school has been very, very encouraging that we're not discouraging or encouraging a certain way, because unity is the most important thing. And so, I do feel sad about the polarization that I see in this. I'm particularly thinking of Canada right now, and we have an election coming up, so the polarization is kind of at an all-time high right now, I would say. And the pandemic has really not helped that, right? So that is kind of sad. It does help us know how to better pray for our brothers and sisters in Canada. But yeah, it's hard to see.
And reading the back of your book, I was reminded of the fact that you were called to overseas missions a long time ago. Not that you're that old, but you've known for a while overseas missions. And when that all came to fruition, was that something that you ever balked against, of like, no, I want to stay as a domestic missionary? What kind of struggle was that, or was that even a struggle for you?
There have been other struggles, where I have balked at what God has wanted me to do, but I think he planted that seed pretty early. Actually, he confirmed it at Eiffel Falls. So I felt like he planted the seed in my mind when I was 13. I just saw this video we were at another church, and we saw this video, and the Iron Curtain had fallen, and there was like a truck full of Bibles, and the people were giving Bibles out to people. And, the volunteers were handing out these Bibles, and the people just had their hands outright, put out for the Bible and just wanted to grab it. And I just thought to myself, wow, that's got to be the best job ever. Right. And that was it. And then when I was 16, I was just sitting in an Eiffel Falls camp meeting, and usually they were actually very interesting, but this time my mind was wandering, and I was like, God, did you really speak to me back then? Like, is this something you really want me to do? And I actually don't really encourage people to just like ask God a question and then let the Bible fall open and put your finger on a verse. But that's kind of what happened. And he led me to the passage where he's talking to the prophet, and he says, like, you must go to the nations that I tell you to, and I will put my words in your mouth, and you will speak to the nations. And so I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. So
Now, brag on your husband a little bit. Talked about Chris and what he's meant to you, but being co-laborers in ministry together, what type of asset has that been that some people just miss out on or don't even think about?
Well, if you could have met Chris when he was 19, when we first met, he didn't know the Lord, and then through it used to, it used to be called Campus Crusade for Christ,
Yeah.
and that ministry through that ministry, and just God's prevenient grace, he became a Christian. I think when he was about 20, 21. And then he was open to whatever God was. He's really big on, God's calling, or whatever that looks like. Just pursue God's calling. So we were called to South Korea, then we were called to come back to Canada and go back to school. And then it was just so obvious that God called us to Taiwan. His calling and his illumination of that path was just really, really clear. And so he came, and we worked with the church for 3 years. And then through some circumstances, I needed to start teaching English. And he taught English for a couple of years, which was good for him to understand what work is like for Taiwanese people. And that was really good. And then 5 years ago, God opened up the opportunity for him to go to a Chinese university, and he just finished his doctorate in Chinese Christianity.
Wow.
So, and now he is the elementary chaplain, among other hats, at our school.
So you guys are really smart then, huh? So a doctor and an author, like I'm kind of like, I feel, well, I'm a Vermonter. Hey, Terri.
We have a joke. I got to tell you this joke. Okay. So our last name in Chinese is Bai, which is the color white.
Okay.
And that's kind of another story. But anyway, so Chris's name in Dr. White is actually a soap here, Dr. White. So his joke name is Dr. Handwash.
Hey, it's good, especially during these days, to keep those hands clean. Terri, with the pandemic, how difficult was it for you to do ministry, to teach? How did you have to adjust on the fly, so to speak?
Honestly, I feel like there's no comparison with what the States and Canada have had to go through. Just like months of lockdown and months of teachers having to do online learning. I just think any teacher in the West who's had to do more than a month of online learning, I just salute those educators.
Yeah.
So I mean, we had to do, I think it was a couple weeks at the end of May, and then the summer was kind of a soft lockdown, but we haven't had to do more than a couple weeks at a time. So my hat is off to those who have had to do it for the long haul.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, but it's a reminder of God's goodness. And I know I sound like a pastor over spiritualizing everything, but it's just so true. And Terri, for you, I'm amazed, and it's just awesome how we kind of grew up together. I mean, we're close in age, but with you being from Forster's Falls and attending Burke camp and all these connections and spending that year together at Bethany Bible College, it was just awesome now to see how God's still at work, because some of our friends, some of our classmates have either fallen away or left vocational ministry. When you hear a story of somebody that you looked up to, or a brother or sister in the Lord that's taken a different path away from vocational ministry or away from God, what does that do inside of you?
Well, to me, those are two different things: walking away from God and walking away from vocational ministry.
Agreed.
Yeah. Of course, I would be pretty heartbroken to hear that they walked away from the Lord. But I think He's not done with their story yet. So, I think that should motivate us to pray without over spiritualizing that. I do think that's the most practical thing we could do. On the other hand, leaving vocational ministry, I tell my students all the time that we need Christians in the arts. We
Yeah.
need Christians in the fashion industry. We need Christian engineers. Like vocational ministry is awesome, and if that's your calling, great. But as a pastor's daughter, I know that that's not always an easy road either. So so wherever God has called you, I think you can have a ministry there.
Certainly true. And Terri Lynn, thanks again for making the time. A couple quick questions, then we will get you out. Terri Payk, I guess it's not Terri Lynn anymore since high school, but it is your good friend Jeff Fuller. So Terri, why should people buy your book?
So, we grow up hearing these ways of God being described, and those are good. Those are really good. But I think that the scripture offers some other ways that can be a B complex shot in the spiritual arm to how we look at God and our relationship with Him. So, yeah, if you're looking, especially if you're kind of going through, you're in a bit of a rut with your quiet times with God, grab a devotional. Let somebody else, in the preface, I say, let somebody else do the hard chewing for a couple of days while you just, read what they've done, and then search the scriptures for yourself and see if what they said, resonates with you and resonates with the word.
And then for you guys being where you are, 12 hours away, and so thank you for staying up relatively late, although the night is still young, I guess, where you are. For financial support, do you raise support? Are you guys just full-time job workers where you are? What does that look like on a practical level?
So some of our staff are funded either partially or fully by a Western, a church or an organization back in the States or Canada. And then other people are vocational workers who do ministry, and that would be us. So I'm a teacher. Chris is a chaplain and a Bible teacher, and we're vocational workers who see this work as our ministry.
So if we want to bless you, we can just do it as a personal gift, funding, however, the best way to do it. And we certainly are.
Or you could just buy the book and bless a couple friends with it.
Yes. Adjectives and analogies. Hey, so I have to ask, what is kind of ruminating in the back of your head for the second book? Or can you share that?
I think that's still way back here in the filing cabinet. It's going to take a little bit to pull it forward.
All right. Well, Terri, the last and final question, actually two-part question. If you were to play in a fictional movie, would you want to play the hero or the villain?
Oh, definitely the hero. Oh, yeah.
See, and you're much better than I, because if it's fictional, I think I'd want to play the villain, and maybe like the villain that everybody loves, like Captain Jack Sparrow. Maybe that's, but
yes.
You're just too sweet and kind. The last question that I have for you, I stole it from Hernando Plano's podcast, Be Contagious. But if or when in your case, the feature film is made about you, your life, who plays you in that feature film?
Oh, man. My friend is always telling me I look like this actress, but I can't bring her name back.
Okay. So an actress then. We'll go with some actress.
Yep.
And just so you're aware, I know that you probably don't listen, or I know that you probably listen to every single podcast I put out, but I always say Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson because we look so much alike. So that's if you're looking for a movie about me, just look for Dwayne Johnson. Nice. But Terri, it's so good to catch up, and not that it matters, but I'm proud of you. I'm excited about the book, Adjectives and Analogies. I'll start it this week, and I have heard great things from my sister and my mom that have already begun it halfway through it. And the fact that you had put yourself out there, even though when you enjoyed writing, doing something, you still show vulnerability by putting pen to paper for everyone to see. And I just want to encourage you and say that You're doing it. You're living what God's called you to do. And we're just so proud to say, hey, I know that author, or I used to know her, one of the two. But Terri, thanks so much.
Jeff. Thank you.
And again, that's Terri Payk, Terri L. Payk. You can find adjectives and analogies on Amazon, amazon.com. And that's simply going there. It is only $6.99 US. That's under $7. That's quick math for me. And I encourage you to get a copy of that book for yourself or someone in your family, just to encourage them as we all seek to grow together and to love God in all his vastness as he loves us. With that, I'm out. My name is Jeff Fuller, hopeforvermont.org, and we just say, love one another as Jesus loves you. Thanks all.